committee to order.
Oh, yes.
We have a quorum. We're missing only member Schiavone, who had an unexpected business trip out of town, out of Fayetteville, and he wasn't able to make it. So he's permitted to miss today. Second item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Anybody make a motion to approve the agenda as written?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion at all? Those in favor?
Aye.
Against? Unanimous, Mayor Clerk. Fourth, and before I ask Mr. Sharp forward, explain that this meeting is the Audit Committee meeting with the auditor to get their input from the auditor. No one else will be interacting with the auditor, just the Audit Committee. Tonight at 7 o'clock, the same auditor will be making a presentation to the board. It'll be a public meeting with public comments. You can comment on the agenda beforehand. All the members, we have members of the, in fact, we have everybody in the room from the board will be free to talk at will with the auditor. This was to be efficient, to get it through, get the members of the board here, of the Audit Committee here, to get their inputs, and we only make recommendations to the board. No decisions, final decisions are made at this meeting. We're just making a recommendation from the Audit Committee members' views about the audit and related events. So I'd ask Mr. Sharp. Can we take 1 second?
Sure.
I had bad words on my document here. We also need, next item, to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
discussion. All in favor? Aye. Against? Now we can ask Mr. Sharp to come forward.
Right there.
My name is Jay Sharp. I'm an audit partner in charge of the town's audit for the year ended June 30th, 2018. I'm here today to report on the audit to the Audit Committee, and then again, like as you said, I'll be here at 7 o'clock to present the audit to the board. So I'm going to get started. The status of the audit. Field work has been completed for the audit. The financial statements and notes have been prepared and are currently in draft form. The audit has been submitted, as it's required to be, to the Local Government Commission for their review and approval. They did have one requested change to the audit report. We're waiting on final approval from the town for that, and then we'll resubmit it to the LGC for their final approval. And of course, we're waiting on approval for the final issuance from the board. So when we submit the audit to the LGC, that doesn't mean we're issuing the audit. They are required to review and approve the audit. We only issue the audit once we receive final approval from the town. And so it's not been issued, it's in draft form. We're waiting on approval to resubmit to the Local Government Commission so they can approve. But once we get their approval and the town's approval, we can issue the audit for June 30th, 2018. A little background on the audit procedures and proceedings. We do some planning procedures. Now, sometimes for audits, we come in preliminarily and do some internal control work. Due to the timeline of the audit, this year we did not do that. We came in for field work and did internal control testing at the beginning of that audit and did the substantive field work at the same time. But so our planning includes obtaining an understanding of internal control and key controls over the town's finances. We do some testing controls over the town's finances. From that, we form what we call risk assessment. It's a risk-based audit approach. So we assess risk to each part of the town's financials. And that risk will be based on our understanding of controls in place and our results from the test of controls. And from that, we're going to key our audit proceedings on the higher risk areas. And those risk areas can change year to year depending on how controls are in place and how we feel like the effectiveness of the controls are. And so it's a risk-based audit approach. We perform audit procedures to obtain sufficient evidence to render an opinion on the financial statements. That's why you hire us, is to give an opinion on the financial statements. Without that opinion, the financial statements would not mean much to anybody. The opinion concentrates on whether the financial statements are free from material misstatement. This is a reasonable, not an absolute assurance. The word material is very important there. Obviously, materiality will differ year in and year out and will differ from any unit, whether it's a town, a county, or a school board. But we calculate materiality based on the town's revenues and assets in place at year end. And so, you may have some immaterial things, $1,000 balance here that we won't test as inconsequential to the overall financial reporting of the town, but it concentrates on whether the financial statements are free from material misstatement. For 2018, a single audit was not required because you did not expend enough state or federal funds to trigger that. You've had single audits in the past, and you may have some in the future depending on if you spend enough federal or state funds. Currently, the federal limit is $750,000. The state limit is $300,000. So if you spend more than that, it triggers a single audit for federal and North Carolina spending. And that's spending, not revenues. You can receive more than you spend on a year. You can spend more than you receive during a year. So that concentrates on the expenditures and not the revenue. So the results of this year's audit. As you already know, the scope and timing of the audit were off track. We can talk about that in detail in a few minutes. And so, we're off track with the scope and timing of the audit. I'm happy to report that we did issue an audit with an unmodified opinion. That is the best possible opinion you can receive on the financial statements. If there's any major issues with the town's financials, first place you'd see it would be in the opinion to the financial statements. We did have material adjusting journal entries this year, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. We also did have one finding this year. There was a material weakness in financial reporting of the town. We're going to talk about that in detail in a second. Some other required communications to the charge of governance with both the board and the audit committee. If there are any new major significant accounting policies that were reported in the notes of the financial statements, we're required to communicate those to you. There were none this year. I don't anticipate any major changes for 2019, as there's been no new really major accounting standards in place under GASB for both 2018 and 2019 that should affect the town. One of the things we look at are estimates. All the estimates we looked at appeared reasonable. No issues with the estimates. We had no disagreements with management. We did have some difficulties encountered with the audit, which we'll talk about, cost delays, and we'll talk about that in a second. One of the things I do want to communicate about upcoming changes that may affect the town's financial reporting and its audit. As I said, 2018-19 will be a quiet year from the standards. There are no new major standards in place that should affect the town's reporting. There is a major standards change that's going to take place that's effective July 1st of this year. So they will affect the town's June 30th, 2020 audit. The yellow book, which is the way the auditors audit towns, counties, school boards, government audits. A new yellow book has been put in place. And one of the key areas of this new yellow book has to do with auditor independence. It's a big topic. There's some gray areas with auditor independence and there's some black and white areas. In every new yellow book that comes out, they try to get rid of the gray areas and concentrate more on black and white and whether the auditor is independent with the audit. This new standard concentrates on the financial reporting preparation process. Currently, we prepared the 2018 audit, and I believe prior auditors have prepared financials for the town. The auditors are going to have to take a more detailed look at the preparation process, specifically looking at if the town could prepare the financial statements themselves. If the auditor feels that the town cannot prepare the financial statements on its own, the auditor then is not independent in relation to the audit. And so that's something that's going to be key. Like I said, it does not affect the June 30th, 2019 audit. It will affect all governmental June 30th, 2020 audits. It's something that the auditors and the LGC has been on with the auditors. We've already had some CPEs, some events already this year talking about that. That's going to be a big change. And so what's it's going to cause is a lot of audit firms are not going to be allowed to prepare financial statements for governments starting in June 30th, 2020. we've already identified several that we know we aren't going to be independent with in regards to the new yellow book. So that's something the town, governments are going to have to look at hiring somebody else separate of the audit firm to actually prepare the financial statements. And so that's something we're going to be having some CPE and some webinars for our clients going forward this year, but it's a big change. And it's effective, like I said, June 30th, 2020. You don't have to worry about for the 19 audit, but it's something that the town should be thinking about moving forward. A couple things coming out in the next few years. There's a new standard with leases. So basically, there's two ways to account for leases right now. You have operating leases, which are expensed as you make the payments, and then there's capital leases, which are shown as debt. It's not effective for the governments for probably about 3 or 4 years, so you've got plenty of time to prepare for this. But moving forward, all leases are going to be capital leases, so they're going to be reported as debt. Currently, that's going to be in place for for-profits this year, not-for-profits next year, and governments are still a few years out. But it's a big change to the way leases are reported financially. I don't believe the town has any major leases, but if you're entering into leases or have any in the books that will be in effect in the next 4 or 5 years, something to consider, as it will be shown as debt. Now, you have an offsetting asset, but it won't be shown as an operating lease moving forward. One thing that's coming on board, it's been since 2001, since it's been a major reporting overhaul for government financial statements. That's when GASB 34 came out. They're currently in the preliminary process of overhauling the financial reporting. And it's probably going to take 7 or 8 years, to be honest with you, as slow as they move. But it could be as quickly as 5. Nothing for the town to be worried about right now, but something I'm telling everybody to be prepared for. There is going to be a major overhaul in the process, financial reporting process, and the way the statements look, probably in the next 5 to 7 years. All right, any questions before I move forward with the delays?
You're going to talk about the deficiencies that you reported?
Yes, we're going to talk about the material weakness, and then we'll talk about delays in the audit process.
Hey, Jay, I was a little confused. Did y'all prepare financial statements for this year's audit?
Yes,
You
we
did
did.
do that?
Yes.
Were you able to separate that responsibility within your firm, or did the same person do the audit to prepare them?
Somebody was on the audit team, helped out a little bit, but we were able to separate out somewhat. For 19, one of the things that looking at the new yellow book starting in 2020 is you can have somebody that's completely off the engagement team prepare the financial statements. But the issue still lies, could the town prepare it if it had to? And if the answer to that is no, then we're not independent. It doesn't matter who prepares it in our firm. We try to separate out the engagement team and the preparation for the basic financial statements, but obviously whoever's working on the audit has more details on how the financial situation of the town works, and so there is some collaboration there.
Jay, I don't mean to nitpick you, but is it the town can prepare the statements, or the town has the staff and skills and knowledge to oversee who's preparing the statements?
That the town has the skills and knowledge internally to prepare it. If they do not have that knowledge internally to prepare it, then they'll have to hire an outside person separate of the CPA firm to prepare the financial statements. So that's something we are looking at for all our government clients. Obviously it's effective already now, but it won't affect the June 30, 2019 audit,
Sure.
but it will affect the 20 audit.
Well, I'm sure you're right. I read the LGC letter a little bit differently, but I'll go back and look at it. I'm sure I was wrong.
Well, as I said, there's some gray areas. The LGC is trying to have auditors, black and white, one way or the other. Now, I'm assuming by the next time the next yellow book comes out, they're just going to say auditors can't prepare them or not. We're moving in that direction. We've slowly been moving in that direction over the last 10 years. I expect that at some point they're just going to say, forget it, you can't prepare it, we don't consider this an independent an issue with independence, so you're just going to be able to audit.
So we'll effectively go to another firm and ask them to do it if we don't have the skills.
Yes.
And then you would then audit it.
Yes.
That's, okay, I think you're referring to the independent side of the things and the signature of the report. But does that also satisfy what is now the significant weakness as well? If a town like us were to use another firm to prepare the financials and then ask you to come in and audit it? Would
That would not solve the material weakness we're going to talk about. No, that would not. That would be a separate funding if the town's unable to prepare the financial statements or unable to hire somebody. Obviously, moving forward in 2020, they wouldn't be able to get an audit if they can't prepare the financial statements themselves or be able to hire somebody to do that.
Let me clarify that. So next year, can we not go out and hire a qualified firm to do it?
Yes.
And then we not get written up as having a material weakness?
It would not solve the material weakness we have in the books for 2018. That's a different issue. Which
No, not 18, going forward.
Yes.
So 19.
Yes.
Can we would not have that? If we had a firm outside doing it for us, if the town manager hired somebody to do it?
To prepare the financial statements?
Yeah.
That would not solve the material weakness that we're going to talk about.
No, I understand that.
Yeah.
But would we have a weakness for not having the skill set in-house?
No, as long as you're hiring somebody independent of the CPA
If we
firm,
don't,
you're
if we
fine.
don't suffer that.
Yeah, you're fine with it. All right, the material weakness we're going to talk about now, and then we'll talk about the delays because we're kind of a little bit one and the same. Obviously we were scheduled to come out in September to start audit field work, and Florence hit the Friday before we were scheduled to come out. So obviously that delayed the audit right there. That was off to a delayed start just because of the hurricane. Unfortunately, we've seen a lot of towns be affected with that. We had 3 government audits, including Holton Beach, got affected by Florence, and were delayed field work with coming in being able to do field work because of the wet storms. Once we were able to come in and start field work, one of the issues, and this is the material weakness with the town's financials this year, is we noted that the town's financials, once we received the trial balance, were not in a full accrual process. There's 2 ways the town prepares the financial statements are prepared 2 ways. There's a full accrual and a modified accrual. And the basic difference is how you account for debt and capital assets. And that's pretty much, there's some other nuances, but those are the 2 biggest factors right there. Is how you affect your debt and your capital outlay, your capital purchases during the year, and how you record your debt proceeds and your debt payments. But everything else pretty much should be the same. Yes, sir.
Can I ask you a question? Because John and I've had this conversation.
Absolutely.
It's education for me.
Yes.
State law says modified accrual accounting.
Yes.
I assume, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm assuming that's okay during the year. You're just saying the trial balance has to be full accrual.
Right.
And once again, this is educating me, so I apologize.
Yeah. So the state requires all governments to report based on GASB, Government Accounting Standards. And they are GASB 34, which is the financials. So the presentation is 2 ways. There's the full accrual, which, as I said, you're presenting assets as, capital expenditures as assets, debts, debt on the books. Then you have your modified, which is your fund accounting, which basically you take, when you pay for debt, it's shown as an expenditure instead of reducing your debt balance. And when you buy something, you go buy a fire truck, it's shown as an expenditure instead of shown as an asset. So that's how the book should be kept all year long, is modified accrual accounting. There's some adjustments that the auditor makes to make the full accrual accounting at year end. There's just 2 exhibits, and most people don't actually even pay attention to those because they don't care about those as much. They care about the fund balance, the fund accounting. So the town's financials should be on the modified accrual throughout the year. And when we came in, we noticed it was not being done that way. We had to make a significant amount of journal entries in order to bring it to modified accrual. There were a number of accounts payable and accounts receivable balances that were the same as last year, and some that were the opposite what they should have been. For example, some payable balances had debit balances instead of credit balances, and your receivables vice versa. So we had a significant amount of additional work in order to make sure that those accruals, are materially correct.
Yeah.
And so that's where our opinion concentrates on whether the financials are, reasonable assurance or whether they're materially misstated or, materially correct. And so there's significant additional work to make sure that we had the accruals at least materially correctly stated as of June 30th, 2018. Our journal entries for the year, get the exact number. these are adjusting journal entries with $2.1 million for June 30th, 2018. Materiality, just for the committee's information, and we calculate materiality on the different funds, and the general fund materiality is $18,000, B part was $48,000, canal dredging $17,000, and the water and sewer fund were $120,000. So that's materiality. And so we had $2.1 million in adjustments, and therefore that's considered a material weakness. There's no wiggle room. The LGC has said if you got the government auditing standard says if you got entries over materiality, it's automatically material weakness. And so that's why we have material weakness in the financial statements this year, because the overall modified accrual process was not taking place during the year. Looking at the prior year entries by the prior year auditor, it appears the same thing was happening last year. They had to come in, make those entries, and actually make their entries from the previous year to correct the beginning fund balance. And that's one of the things we also had to correct was beginning fund balance was off. Numbers, the general fund, all the governmental funds, the beginning fund balance was off $128,000. The water and sewer fund was off $121,000. So both those the fund balances were off material amounts to start out with. They did not agree. The beginning fund balances did not agree with the prior year audit.
Okay, so to summarize what you just told me, the town was not doing modified accrual accounting
That's correct.
as defined by the LGC
Well, it's defined as by GASB, defined as accounting, same, yes.
during the year.
Yes.
Okay. But your weakness says the town is not accounting for its finances on a full accrual basis. It's page 71.
Yeah, when it comes to receivables and payables, there's no difference. The modified accrual and the full accrual, they're the same. If you look on exhibits 1 and exhibits 3, they're the exact same balances. And so there's no difference in that methodology when it comes to payables and receivables. And that's where we had the majority of our additional testing and the balances were off. And it's coming in, if an account was $48,000 last year and it's $48,000 this year, you don't really see receivables and payables stay the same year in and year out. They usually change and get updated, monthly, if not annually, depending on the account and where that money's either being paid to or coming from the activities of the town. So that's where our concentration on was material weakness is the accrual payment for accounts payable and accounts receivable were not done during the year.
Now, back to the beginning of the year balance differences you referred to.
Yes.
Was it that the books of record of the town were not modified to agree to the audit report, or that the audit report was in error last year?
I can't comment on the audit report. We didn't perform that audit. I would assume the 2017 audit is correct. If it wasn't correct, it should have been restated by the auditor, and the town should have brought that up to the audit firm that did the audit last year. So our assumption is that it was done correctly. We do get access to the prior audit work papers, and we have to get comfortable with beginning balances when you take over an audit. That's part of our audit procedures, to get comfortable with those. And we did get those work papers and review those, and agreed some of those work papers back to the 2017 audit. There was no differences from the work papers we saw with the 2017 audit. The difference has to do with fund balance. If you have a fund balance, I'm just throwing out numbers of $500,000 at the end of 2017 for the audit report, then the beginning fund balance per the town's accounting should be $500,000. It should be in sync. If not, that means the town's not recording the adjustments that the auditor gave incorrectly. They were off, all funds were off. The general fund, the water and sewer fund were up materially off when we started doing the trial balances.
How far off were they?
Said, let's see. The general fund was off $87,000. B part was off $41,000. So the total governmental funds were off $128,000. The water and sewer fund were off $121,000.
The town puts out monthly financial statements that say the account balances as of the end of the month. So we just now got to June 30th of this year. So basically then, there's 2.1 million in adjustments from that was adjusting those reports and those accounts to match what's in the audit. Is that, just help me understand, you know, what the June 30th numbers that were reported versus the numbers that are in the audit, and what the nature of the adjustments that were needed.
Yeah, I mean, the adjustments needed, were for June 30th, 2018.
Right.
So obviously, I would assume that they would affect the 19 numbers somewhat. Some of them would affect, some of those adjustments would affect the 19 numbers rolling forward. Because I think part of the issue with the fund balance was the prior year auditor entries were not correctly put into the system. And we know when we made some of our adjustments, it was correcting for not having those entries in place from 2017 on. So it rolls forward. If you're not, if you don't make the trial balance equal the audit at the end of the year, then obviously you're going to have issues moving forward until that happens.
Okay.
But isn't the fact that we present monthly and we would on June 30th present really actual to budget? So we prepare, the board has approved a budget, and the town tells us monthly how are we doing against that budget, not on the accrual basis, just on a cash basis. That's the only thing we see. We don't see any other reports during the year. We don't ask for. We just get, we want to know what the budget was and how we're doing against the budget. And it has no receivables, no payables. It's just how much did we say we're going to spend? Have we spent it? Have we not spent it? So that's what we see on June 30th. We don't see the financial statements on June 30th. We only see a budget to actual.
Well, I would think the budget should be on a modified accrual basis also. Because at the end of the year, one of the reports, budget versus actual, is comparing the budget that the town board approves, the original budget versus the final budget, and then compares that to the actual audited numbers at the end of June 30, 2018. So I would think you have to budget modified accrual, so the financial reporting audit would be comparing apples to apples. If you got a budget on a cash basis and your financial reporting is on the modified accrual basis, there's going to be there could be some major differences that causes the budget to overexpend possibility if you don't accrue everything that comes in place during the year.
But none of the adjusting entries that you made throughout the audit would have affected a cash balance?
I believe it would affect the overall cash balance. Now, the overall cash balance is what I think there was some movement between funds, but there was no the overall cash balance for all the funds together did not get affected by those adjustments. Now,
So to put in plain language, you're moving money from the left pocket to the right pocket, you still had it in your pocket.
Well,
yeah, the cash flow basis, yes.
But though his system, the modified accrual system accrues expenditures that we may not recognize in the monthly budget process. It's based on commitment as opposed to, the fulfillment of the liability. And it's modified accruals, we're not even close to accrual process that we understood in the business world. So, is there can you give a specific example that would, of an entry that would affect how we perceive the monthly activity in the budget process that might have been affected by one of your entries?
Sure. I mean, if we have an accounts receivable account, let's say last year was $50,000, and when we got trial balance, this year's balance was $50,000. It's the same balance as last year, and when we did audit, detailed audit procedures on that, and discovered it was, really $20,000, and we have to adjust it by $30,000. That's, the other side of that is your income statement. It's either the revenues or expenses. So for receivables, we're either increasing or decreasing revenues to bring that receivable balance to what it should be. And same thing with the payables. If we're seeing, hey, the payable balance is not correct, if we have to add $50,000 to payables, that's adding $50,000 to expenses.
I'll give you let's say taxes, the number one revenue thing that we collect. In modified accrual, when taxes become legally due, which is, I don't know what that point in time is, are you saying that we should book a receivable for millions of dollars at that point in time? Against, we'll always have an allowance for doubtful accounts for the, to offset that. But under your approach, we would record all of that, and we would see probably a big surplus in the month of January, I guess, is when that hits. Is that?
You record a receivable when that amount becomes due to the town. And obviously, property taxes become due to the town when you issue those statements. Everybody gets those, whether it's your house tax or obviously vehicles are collected through the state. But yeah, when you issue that, and this town's a little, you guys collect your own taxes. A lot of towns, the county collects the taxes themselves and flows it through to the towns and cities, and so they're dependent on the county knowing when these balances come in. But obviously, I'll collect your taxes yourself. So once you issue the statements of property taxes are due, that's when the receivable should be set up. As you receive those payments, and reducing that receivable throughout the year.
Yeah, I mean, my question was, the reports we get, revenue, expense, and I guess the concern is June 30th, we get that final report, revenue, expense, but then there's $2.1 million of adjustments for those numbers, and that's 10% of our budget, before those numbers end up in the financial statements that get audited. So is that correct?
Yeah, that's why it's a material weakness, because there was a $2.1 million of adjustments we had to do.
And if this year's like last year, the numbers we just got a week or two ago are probably going to be adjusted by 10%.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing the town needs to do is take the journal entries, make them in the system, and make sure their June 30th 2018 trial balance agrees to the audit. And then, if there's any entries that would have affected 2019, reverse those entries out for the year in, 2019 year. And so you're not overstating or understating revenues and expenses.
Is it possible the adjustments from the 2017 audit would have had an effect on that?
Some of the fund balance issues were because of 2017 entries. It looked like out during our procedures, a lot of those entries were made into the system. I know there were some accounting glitches with the system that caused some issues when we first got in. For example, the bank reconciliation was off $1 million. That's because of accounting glitch in the system, in which we had prepared and made an entry twice instead of once to make the reconciliation.
Is that a software problem with our software?
It looked to me, when we were talking to the accounting staff, it appeared to be a software glitch. They actually contacted the software company.
And they fixed it?
Yeah, they fixed that and got us a new bank rec, I believe in February to correct that.
Scary.
But unfortunately, working with a number of government units, there's a lot of softwares out there, and there's some that have gotten older and haven't corrected themselves, or the maintenance on that's not as good as it should be. I know the LGC is really, I think they got a project in the works to try to get everybody on a few softwares, because if you look at, I think there's maybe 500 towns and cities throughout North Carolina, and you probably have 50 different softwares being used. It's a problem. And they're not all highly maintained, because software companies might introduce a software, and once it's sold, after a few years, moving on to something different and not properly maintaining the other software that they put in place before. We're seeing this all over the board, especially towns.
Somehow we got from talking from an annual point of view to a monthly point of view. And let's say that for whatever reason, certain of these accounts, the town would elect to only modify one time a year at June 30th, like my example of the taxes. They would come in and say, okay, this is unpaid, and to like it June 30th. And you don't have to make any adjustments to the is that still a material deficiency if we were to take that approach with the town?
As long as it's corrected at year end. Because we're reporting on the year-end balances, and we've seen some towns that they don't want to keep up with some of these balances on a month-to-month basis, because some of them are really minor. Some major balances like taxes, I would not recommend waiting until the annual audit to book it properly. That's a major balance. I would look at that monthly. But some of these minor accounts, they went to year end to correct those. And we've seen that with other towns, but it wouldn't be as long as if that issue creates an over expenditure in the budget, then you'd have an issue. So you got to carefully monitor the budget's done right. Start out the year, so you're not going to have issues when you start fixing everything to the modified accrual basis at year end, that it doesn't cause the budget to be overextended.
So if I can ask another question,
Yes.
because we talked about the delays, and this is a really significant delay. It's now July, and we still don't have the audit in for last year.
Yes.
We're ready to start auditing 2019 already. When did you provide the draft audit report to the town?
That would have been April 9th.
April and 9th.
The draft one, yes.
And when did you receive the final management representation letter? Or the MD&A for the management discussion analysis section of the audit?
And just background, management discussion and analysis is about it depends, about a 10-page document that goes in toward the beginning of the financial statements. That has to be prepared by the town. The auditor, no matter under any circumstances, cannot prepare that because that's management's duty, and obviously the auditor can't do a management's duty. That impairs independence automatically right there. And so the LGC has issued a template for that, which most towns prepare on. You can add additional information to that if you want. Some towns do, some don't. We received, that was returned to us. I believe the town might have outsourced that service to somebody. That was returned to us on May 23rd. We had a couple minor changes, so the MD&A was finalized on June 10th.
June 10th?
Yes.
So that's a 2-month delay in the audit right there.
Well, and you're aware we got put on the bad list, or the unit assistance list for late audit.
I have not seen that letter.
Oh, yeah, we were. I think that was May 20th, if I remember the letter right. I mean, is that common? I mean, one late audit to be added to the list, or is that?
Usually the LGC doesn't issue that type of letter unless you've been late multiple times. I would think this year, with the hurricane and everything, they wouldn't have issued that type of letter. I'd have to look at the letter, see the more specifics, but we've encountered government units receiving that in the past, but it's usually due to multiple late audits.
I mean, I've got it very brief. It just says our concern with Golden Beach are as follows. You are not current on your annual audits. Inclusion on the list is not intended to be punitive, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's basically, it says we're on the units assistance list because of the late audit. And then this was May 20th.
Okay, I said the LGC typically does not issue that type of letter unless it's in late issues multiple times, because then they'll actually have a team come in and look at the causes and try to help the town out. They have a team that goes throughout the state and assists towns who are have multiple late audits to try to help them get on track and get the audits in on time.
Okay, so if we file an on-time audit this year, we'll get off the list?
Yes.
If we don't, we won't.
Yeah, pretty much I guess, yes.
Okay.
I would guess if we don't, then they'd come visit us.
Yeah, they might come visit anyways. It's not a they're coming in to audit you visit, like the IRS or somebody would come in. It's more, hey, what can we help you with to make sure the audits are done, put in time, more of a kind of friendly visit, I would say, than a harsh visit.
So, assuming we want to get off the list, I mean, what do we need to do differently this year versus last year that got us to this point?
Well, you know, obviously, the financials a year in have to be moved to modified accrual. You know, as an auditor, I've done enough government audits. I don't expect a perfect audit. I mean, in my professional career from governments, I've had 5 perfect audits from the same unit. And that was a pretty big audit that, you know, had a huge accounting department. Everybody's going to have adjustments, and that's just part of life. But obviously $2.1 million worth of adjustments is going to create too much additional work to make an audit on time. Town needs to work on getting its process in place to make sure that at the end of the year, when June 30th, 2019 trial balance is finalized, it's on as much of a modified accrual basis as they can put it on. Whether that's internal processes, we've seen some towns hire local CPA firms to assist them in making the adjustments from the basis they've been using during the year, which is mostly cash to the modified accrual, to make sure that when the auditor comes in, there's minor adjustments that need to be made, if any.
So, with the goal of, and it's October 31st to file this year?
It's October 31st is the deadline, and it's a 30-day free extension. You don't get a penalty for having in. As long as you get in by December 1st, you get it.
Okay, so December 1st, if we file this year, we'll get off the
You'll get off that
bad
list.
list.
After December 1st, the LGC requires an amended contract, and then you remain on that list. Yes.
Okay, so what are the milestones? What are the things that we need to hit to make it?
Yeah, I mean, basically, you need to have a good trial balance in place mid-August.
Mid-August, month from now.
Yeah, sooner the better, obviously. The auditor would have to be able to come in, between mid-August and mid-September, and have, a list of everything that, the auditor did. Obviously, once the auditor comes in, you'd probably have additional things, pulling invoices and stuff like that. But you have to have an auditable trial balance that, that would require very few adjustments, mid-August.
Okay.
Because, quite frankly, the LGC, they update their financial reporting templates, and they do that annually in mid-August. So anybody turns their audits in before mid-August hasn't used the required template, the updated template. So mid-August is when you want to be ready to start auditing. And you'd like to have field work between that and mid-September, have it completed, because there'll be questions, always questions going back and forth, and have a financial statement draft in place, to meet the December 1st deadline by end of October. If you want to meet the October 31st deadline, probably beginning to mid-October.
Okay. And then it goes to that includes the management discussion analysis and everything, the whole package?
Well, I mean, yeah, once the auditor, you can't prepare management discussion analysis until the auditor gives you a draft of the financials.
Okay, so you would give the draft mid-September, and the management discussion analysis would be done by, if we were shooting for October 31st.
You want to have a draft in place by the beginning of October.
Okay.
So you have time to, the management discussion analysis generally you should be able to turn that around in 5 business days.
5 days, 1 week?
That's typically what we see from most of our clients is 5 business days, unless there's some issues with the audit discussion.
Okay.
It takes,
And is that the last step then you submit? Or
well, once approval either from the town's management or the board itself to submit the audit. It said it takes an hour to submit the audit. There's a few spreadsheets we have to fill some numbers out on, but it literally takes an hour to submit the audit to LGC.
and that needs board of commissioners approval?
It does not, that's up to the town. That's
Okay.
not an LGC requirement.
Okay.
We don't give it to the LGC unless we have somebody, whether it's the board or the town's approval, management's approval before we submit it.
So like right now, we're not approved, right? We're draft?
Yeah, the draft.
So we have not submitted to LGC.
We submitted a draft to LGC. They reviewed it and had one change.
Okay.
Just waiting on that
Okay.
change to be approved, and then we can resubmit it.
So if the board approves it tonight, then we're going to say we have an approved audit.
Sure, and I can resubmit it to LGC, and they should approve it within a day.
Okay. And that's what we want to happen October 31st or at the latest, right?
Yeah, I said December 1st
December
is the
1st,
latest you
November,
can get that audit in.
October or
Yeah.
November, Board of Commissioners meeting, we need to be where we are right now with this audit. Okay.
So you got everything in June the 10th. When did you submit to the LGC a draft?
June 11th.
11th. And you just said you did it with town approval. We didn't, the audit committee didn't meet with you and the board didn't meet with you. Where did you get the approval to send it to the LGC?
Yeah, I went over the process with David and he gave me clearance to submit it. Like I said, that's not issuing the audit, that's just submitting to LGC for their review.
Do you normally send a draft in, or is it very?
Yeah, it's always a draft. It's
Always a
written on-
draft in.
Yeah, always. Like I said, it's not considered issuance until the town officially approves it. So I mean, if the LGC gave us clearance in December and the town didn't give us approval until today, we wouldn't issue it till today. So we're not going to issue it, even if LGC says it's good, until we get official approval.
Jay, can I go back over your timeline a little bit?
Absolutely.
Particularly when it comes to the management discussion and analysis. You said you sent the LGC template to David on April 9th, correct?
That's when I sent the first draft of the financial statements.
First draft of financial statements.
Yes.
Okay.
I may have sent him the template also, so he had something to go by, because the template's updated on an annual basis. I usually send out the requirements, but
Well, reason, once again, there's been some questions about how long it took David to do the management discussion and analysis section. So this week, last week, I did a formal records request to the town for all the emails between the town and your firm.
okay,
And so I got a couple of dates here on throw out at you, see if it makes sense.
sure.
April 9th, you sent the MD&A template to David. I have on May 7th that you sent a draft MD&A to David, according to your email. On May 23rd, Alicia Brooks sends the first draft of the MDA to you.
Yes.
And on May 30th, David sends the MDA to Jay. So, if you look at these dates and look at the emails, I don't know what that draft MD&A was you sent to David on May 7th, but it really looks like, if you send him a draft of what he's supposed to use or start with or whatever, he finished it in a couple of weeks.
So I don't know what that May 7th, because we can't prepare the MD&A, so we would not have sent him a draft.
I'll be glad to show you the email afterwards.
Sure, let's see what that email says. Like I said, we sent the draft on April 9th. The MD&A was returned, Lydia Brooks prepared it on May 23rd.
Yep.
Then the MD&A was finalized on June 10th, and we submitted to the LGC on June 10th.
And if I understood you earlier, you said you couldn't start the MD&A until the draft audit was prepared?
Yeah, typically, they'd have to have the final numbers to prepare the MD&A. I mean, you could technically start it, but you can't give.
And the draft audit wasn't sent to us till May 15th.
No, draft audit was sent April 9th.
Yeah, the date on this audit here says April 8th, the one that's in our packet.
Yeah, that's the date of issue, I mean, that's the date where we have substantial amount of work, that's the date of the report.
Okay.
So we feel comfortable, sending a draft, once we've had enough work done on the audit to render an opinion.
This is one we just got just now. This is it, so it hasn't changed since April 8th?
We've had some minor adjustments back and forth, but nothing that would have changed the date of the report.
Okay.
So once again, I'll be glad to show them to you. I got them all here. I got an email from you on May 15th that says audit draft from you to the town.
Sure.
So, if he has to have an audit draft to do the MD&A, then basically it's finished in a couple of weeks, not 2 months.
Yeah,
And I think the question is,
the first draft was sent on April 9th.
Yeah, no, I think what he's going is, how come we couldn't avoid getting on this list? What needed to be submitted before May 20th that would have not had this letter get issued?
I said, if the MD&A, after April 9th, if we got an MDA in a couple of weeks, I'm not sure that would have gotten you off the list or not. But, we could have submitted, in April sometime.
Did we get this because we hadn't sent them anything? Is that what happened?
Yes, more than likely, it would be my guess. You'd have to ask LGC whether it was sent that.
Okay.
But you said an outsider prepared this, right? And you
That's my
think
understanding,
you-
yes.
To work out to get the final approved one?
Yes.
So while you might have gotten something May 23rd, it wasn't in shape to go in?
There were some minor differences that we had to have updated. The copy she sent, the numbers were pasted in there as a picture, so we couldn't make those minor adjustments. We had to have the Excel files back. She emailed back and said she couldn't give them to us until a week after, so she sent those. Once we got those, we were able to make those minor adjustments and update the NDA.
But May 23rd was already too late. So,
Jay, I'll be honest, once again, I'm not trying to nitpick or throw you under the bus, but going through these emails, I mean, there was an email from you on November 20th to the town saying target to have audit submitted by December 31st. And then on January 8th, there was an email that said, sorry for the delay, should be finished up in a couple of weeks. And then February 13th, it says from Jay, we are nearing the end.
Yeah.
So what happened between December 31st and April? I mean, why the delay? Because yeah, obviously, from those emails, you seem to feel like we will finish up around the first of the year.
Yeah, I was, in conversation with my staff, and, obviously I wouldn't send those without conversation with them, and, they kept on updating me, saying we were close, and then they'd find something else. I said, a lot of it had to do with the accrual process. One thing would turn into another one, and we had to dig a little deeper. 'Cause the last thing we want to do is present an audit that was not materially correct. If we had fear that some other accounts were possibly materially misstated, we felt like we had to dig a little deeper. We kept on finding payable and receivable balances that, we kept on digging a little deeper. Fund balancing created an issue, digging and trying to make sure, understanding how to adjust that to correct it. Because you can't just say, hey, it's off $120,000, we're just going to plug it. That's not going to work. And so we had to dig in deeper with that to make sure that we were adjusting that correctly, so it's not a problem going forward correctly next year. Because if we just plugged it, you continue having that problem.
But from that timeline, it took you 4 months to get to that point of the adjustments that needed to be made.
Back and forth, yeah. Like I said, we didn't receive the corrected bank reconciliation until February. I'm not going to release an audit when it's, reconciliation's off $1 million. So.
didn't this bank reconciliation was up $1 million?
Yes.
In February?
No, that's the corrected one.
When was?
The original was yet to
elaborate, please.
Yeah, I mean, when we came in to do field work, the main account was off $1 million in reconciliation.
So the bank thought we had more money or less money?
The bank balance is right, it's the book balance that was.
Our books didn't agree with the bank.
Not on the reconciliation, no.
But is that a software issue?
By $1 million, I don't know.
Yeah, that ended up being software issue, and the adjustments from the previous auditor caused that, but still, we had to.
Okay. I assume what we're talking about here is all the extra work you had to do associated with this audit, right? And
I had a question. Through this whole period of time, how often did you have someone from your firm physically here? Was it, other than the initial review when the internal control things are going on, like, were they ever back present face-to-face here, or was all of this done via phone or email?
Yeah, and then we were here initially in November, and everything else, was done via phone or email.
And meanwhile, these people are obviously working other assignments at the same time, and
Yeah, the hurricane threw us into a tizzy with scheduling, because we're going to say we had 3 audits that got pushed behind because of that. Trying to catch up, and obviously others, you're going to just work all year round, so you had other assignments also. But we're trying to fight for that the first thing works out.
Is it fair, from what I've read, you started your field work about November 13th?
That sounds about right.
like I said, I think what we're trying to get a good understanding of is what extra work was required and why was it required. So you've explained a lot of it. We just need to get a comfortable feel for, okay, this is what you had to do that you didn't anticipate you'd have to do, and here's why.
Yeah, I mean, obviously with the accrual and, in the accrual process, we had to dig a lot deeper to make sure that we felt comfortable with those balances. We were not anticipating having to do that. One of the things we noted when we received the last year work papers, we always, look at last year's work papers, sometimes, get comfortable with the balances. We know there was a significant amount of journal entries last year, that automatically put the audit at high risk to start out with. Whenever you have high risk, you got extra work.
So you did not anticipate this being high risk coming in?
I don't know why there wasn't a material weakness on 2017's financial.
Not material, significant deficiencies, but no material weakness.
The material weakness didn't have to do with the accrual process. So.
But I mean, there was no material weakness noted in last year's audit.
No, significant deficiencies didn't go into effect, didn't really describe the adjustments that the prior auditor made.
Okay.
Do you recall the amount of the adjustments in 2017 audit? Because the
I
auditor,
think that amount was like $21 million.
$21 million.
$21 million.
That's a copy of the adjustments we got from the prior auditor. I mean,
It's more than our entire annual
I'm
budget.
assuming that's
What is it? I mean, what could be $21 million?
I mean, a lot of that was, I think there was one major, I have to go back and look. Like I said, we didn't do the 2017 audit, but a lot of the entries they were making was the accrual process again, making sure that the payables and receivables were correct.
$21 million for adjustment.
That's the copy of the adjustments I have. You have to.
I mean, that, we don't.
But let me ask you a question.
what is
You gotta be careful with the absolute numbers.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that a debit and a credit? So, I mean, when you're making this adjustment entry, you're taking it from one place and adding it to another place.
Well,
An adjustment's an adjustment, I'm sorry.
I understand it's
Sometimes.
adjustment, I understand it's adjustment, but you gotta be careful with debit and credit. So, I mean, it's not just like I had 21 million, I had to put it somewhere.
No, but I had it in the wrong place and I had to move it to where it belonged.
True, but it's half, and it's really more like 11 and a half, picking under or something, right?
Well, some of them might be moving between funds. Other might be adding revenues and expenses to the bottom
And
line.
that, no, this wasn't yours, this was what you inherited coming out of 2017.
Yeah, that was the prior year audit.
Okay.
And you had to evaluate all of those.
But that,
Yes. Well, I mean, obviously, we had to look at those in detail. That's part of the fund balance to make sure that those entries were made. Part of that was why the fund balance was not correct, beginning fund balance.
so what I think I'm hearing is you went in not thinking it was a high-risk audit, somewhere around early on, probably on, you concluded it was a high-risk audit, and that necessitated a lot of extra diligence work on your end? Was that, am I being
Yeah,
fair?
based on the significant efficiencies we saw in the 2017 audit, we see a lot with smaller towns.
Okay,
That's commonplace. Based on the number of entries that we saw from the auditor, I would have expected a material weakness.
okay.
And
In
that's
last
why
year's audit,
yeah.
okay.
If we had seen that, that would have been a different story in the other process.
So are we gonna be high risk next year?
Yes,
No matter who does it?
I mean, we would consider it high risk just by the number of entries. I
Okay.
would assume that probably another auditor would consider it high risk. I mean, it's auditor judgment. They may judge it not to be high risk if, some processes were changed or new protocols were put in place that they feel like reduce that risk, but I would consider it high risk.
And what will that do to price?
I mean, that's additional work, so that's, obviously additional work, higher price.
Okay.
Jay, those entries that had to be made, I mean, did you find a common theme? I mean, was it just like a misunderstanding of one or two processes? I saw some emails about money moving directly out of funds where it should have been moving from funds to cash and then cash to somewhere else. I mean, did you see this a common theme in those entries, or?
I mean, the most common theme would have been the accrual process, making sure all the accounts receivable and payable balances at year end were the correct amounts.
Okay.
And I said, we adjusted the material amounts. There's still some that if you look at trial balance, the audited trial balance versus last year are the same because they're not material accounts or the difference was not material. But that's just something that is continuously updated.
So we're going to be considering whether or not to recommend to the board approval of a revised contract, because the LGC won't approve it until they get your contract your total overrun costs? Have you estimated that?
$10,000.
As I recall, the contract calls for a $10,000 increase over the original, but I wonder what your total amount was. Yeah, I'm asking what the total was. So it's a 10,000.
Yeah.
So the original proposal and contract amount, we proposed the audit would take 112 hours. We do offer a government discount, so the total cost would have been, that's the audit contract amount, $14,784, 112 hours. The actual, and that's as of last week, time is 298 hours at a cost of $44,361 to the firm.
So Jay, let me ask you another question.
Yes.
If I read the contract correctly, and if I understand what LGC told us on November 9th, you were supposed to submit a form to LGC requesting approval for additional work once we were late.
We submitted an amended contract, yes.
You say that again?
We have to submit an amended contract
To LGC.
to the LGC for their approval.
With
yes.
their LGC Form 205 and all that stuff, so I ring a bell.
I don't know the exact form name, but yeah, it's an amended contract. It's like
So
a
you
2 page document.
submitted a request to LGC for approval to amend the contract and.
I've not submitted the amended contract yet because it's not been approved by the town. The town has to sign it. I'm not going to submit that until I know there's a date, because you just have to keep on. Like if I said back in, on December 2nd, we know we're not getting this in, we're going to put a January 31st date on it, and then January 31st rolls around and we don't have it, and I got to resubmit it. So we generally don't do the amended contract until we know we're at the point where we're going to be able to submit it within probably 30 days or somewhere around there. So we'll have a good comfortability that I'm going to be able to submit it. So we have to give it to town. It's just like the regular contract, they have to approve and sign before they give it back to us, and then we submit to LGC.
Well, I'm used to the corporate world, not the municipal world, but when I go to read the letter from LGC, from the state treasurer, it said you're supposed to submit an amended contract and amended fee then for any additional work. So I'm just.
Yeah, and it asks when you're going to have the audit in, and we don't have it. We didn't have a date at that point. I'm not going to submit a contract to redo. So until I get comfortable with the actual date or have a feeling of when we're going to be able to submit the audit, and it's when we start the amended contract.
And you don't see we're going to have any problems from the LGC by the fact we didn't do it up front like they instructed as opposed to do it in arrears?
They don't.
Okay.
They just look at the signatures and
As long as somebody's paying the bills?
Yeah.
As long as the board has approved it.
Yeah.
I just want to be clear that I got the right numbers. You bid the project at 14,000 something.
Yes.
You actually spent 44, so you went over by 30,000, and you're asking for 10.
Yes.
You're going to eat the 20.
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, first year audits take longer. It was a 3-year proposal, so that's an investment in the next 2 years. Because we're starting the work paper from scratch. We're starting the financials. We copied, from other governments. We're essentially starting the grouping and everything from scratch. And so there's going to be some additional work that we don't really include in the proposal because we know the first year is going to take time.
And second, third year, you're more efficient.
It should be. If the financial's not prepared, all you got to do is drop new numbers in, and everything should go forward.
And we should at least agree with their beginning balance now if you came up with
Yeah,
beginning balance.
and governments are not high realization jobs. We don't expect to make 100% realization on a governmental job. And any CPA firm, I don't think. Unless you have a really large government, the smaller ones, you're not going to make 100%. That's where we get a discount.
At some point in time, though, you knew you were, before you issued this revised contract, you knew you were considerably over budget. Did you, it's one thing for this form to them, but at least to notify us that, please expect my bill's going to run over.
Yeah, there was a letter drafted Sent to you, but we had some discussions. I know, I had a discussion with John early on, in the winter that, he wanted to call me with wanted an update on the audit, and I gave him an update on the audit, and, told him that we, obviously having some significant amount more work to do on the audit. At that point,
did you say that there's likely to be an increase in fee?
I believe so, yes.
And that was when?
That would have been probably February timeframe.
Well, you probably knew right away when you couldn't even get the beginning balance to reconcile, you're gonna have extra work. Is that a fair statement?
Well, I mean, sometimes they're easy, that's an easy fix. It's just
Okay.
one or two things. Sometimes it's more difficult, and it's ended up being more difficult. So, I had to look at it more detail, and look at the $21 million in entries from last year. Kind of told me we're probably going to run into some issues, but, try to be optimistic at the end.
Okay. I think, trying to get the timeline. So initially, sounds like you were optimistic, you knew there were some startup issues, but you thought they'd be overcome, and then by the winter, you realized that you were digging a hole, and then now we know how deep the hole is. Is that?
Yeah, it was, January, February timeframe started, we were beginning to.
From the emails I saw between the town and Jay, it appeared he was optimistic till about February.
Reality hits.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that 44,000, just out of curiosity, I'm not exact, but how much of that is your time? You don't have to be precise.
298 hours is what
I got it.
down is their total.
No,
Yeah, but how many of those hours are his hours?
Yeah, just roughly, because that's,
Of that time, 33 hours are mine.
yeah.
So that's-
And ordinarily, how much of that original 112 would you assume would have been your time? Ballpark, you don't have to be precise.
I would say 10 to 15 hours.
Okay. It's been many years since I was in public accounting firm, but I know that partners always had a lot higher rate than I did.
Yeah, that's right. I'm not,
I know if I'd overrun a job like this, I'd been
I
gone.
don't try to get in the weeds.
The other item I had, I don't know if we're moving there, is describes maybe you already did, the material, there was a significant deficiency, there was material weakness. Are those the two big takeaways from the audit, or?
Well, so obviously there's three categories. There's just deficiencies that would be reported in a management letter.
Okay.
If it gets above a deficiency, it's required to be funded. There's a significant deficiency, which, the town had last year, or material weakness. The big difference is material weakness is such processes are in place that, cause the financials to be, off materially, which is $2.1 million in entries substantiate that the original trial balance versus the audit trial balance, where the entries substantiated material weakness.
Okay. Yeah, that one I think we've discussed. It's the first one, significant deficiency criteria. The town should have someone who is familiar with government accounting principles that can review its financial statements each year and determine if they've been properly prepared accurately. In a condition, the town staff has the ability to perform daily functions to optimize the finance department. However, their expertise is limited in the area of financial statement preparation in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, specifically with full accrual basis account statements as required by GASB 34.
So that's a repeat finding from last year.
Okay. So there's been no progress made when you...
Unless that's completely corrected, we're not going to remove that finding.
Okay. Did you see evidence that it had been corrected?
Well, no, I mean, with the material weaknesses along with the other stuff, we didn't feel like it was appropriate to remove that finding for 2018.
Okay. As best I can tell, it's been on there since 2008.
And you obviously come in and looking at the bankrupt paying off $1 million to start out with, that gave us some concerns, and we decided not to remove it.
And you do not audit internal controls, right? You make sure they're adequate.
We gain an understanding, we'll do some testing controls on certain sections, and we'll rotate that year in, year out. We don't give an opinion on internal controls.
Okay.
We don't audit them to say, but we gain an understanding.
And you are aware we had RSM doing internal controls review?
Yes, I've
And
seen that before.
You've seen that? Okay, so you took that into
took that into consideration.
Okay.
Another reason we applied high risk.
I'm sorry?
That's another reason we applied high risk.
Oh, because of that, you applied high risk?
Well, that was one of, I mean,
One of the
there's a
reasons.
totality of a lot of things.
Okay.
So on a high risk audit, we're not going to rely on internal controls. That produces more work, so we're having to look at more things.
Okay.
Any more questions?
Are you satisfied with the, assume you're satisfied with the responses you got back from the town?
Yeah, I mean, I said,
I mean, you think it's a reasonable plan to address them?
I think it's going to be corrected. I've seen these issues be corrected. They can be corrected quickly, especially if you have some outside help to come in first year and probably more intense help. And then as the town, is able to do their full accrual with their payables and their receivables and get more and seeing them be able to do that on an annual basis and probably less and less outside help would be necessary.
Okay, I think we've had discussions, but that outside help would be like compilation services that would help us compile and create the draft financials, or what would
I'm not sure if compilation would be required, but it's just somebody coming in and helping the books get closed out.
Okay.
If that's the end product is compilation, it's whatever the town wants, but I don't, when we've seen people in other firms, other towns have a firm come in and help them, it's just been, they come in and help them and help them close out the books, turn it to the accrual process it should be. They don't actually have a compilation come out of it, but I mean, that's up to the town, because compilation is new.
So then you get into the issue, you just closing once a year, you close monthly, or some iteration of.
Probably should start, in my opinion, it should start more monthly basis than moving to quarterly than annually. As the town sees, hey, this is what needs to be done, and formulate a checklist of procedures in place to, close them out monthly, quarterly, and then, annually.
And that includes all the monthly accruals then?
Yeah, some of them are quarterly accruals, some of them are monthly, so it's good to get that process in place, especially start out on a monthly basis with outside help. Move to that quarterly basis, and maybe just having them help annually. It'll be a process there.
Are you familiar with the consultant that the town has hired to help with that?
I'm not familiar.
I mean, you've obviously emailed with her, so I mean, you've had.
Is that I've just got the MD&A from Lithia.
Yeah, Lithia Brooks, yeah.
I don't know her personally.
She's been hired?
I guess you've been hired to help.
I did not know that. Okay.
Any other questions?
No, I think we've addressed the ones. So you didn't see any issues with this one, there's a list that said we're on the letter that said we're on assistance, and then the other one just said there's an issue that needs to be done on this audit, and then 3 issues on the upcoming, you didn't see any significant problems? Okay.
Not ordinary.
Good.
Okay.
Just for we've received a revised contract for the audit that was just completed.
Correct.
Does that, what applies to the 2000, the audit that would commence
We
now?
have to decide if we want to recommend to the board that we,
But do we have a revised fee quote?
we'll get that till you decide to pick the auditor. But can you already tell us what it would probably cost us to do the audit next year?
That would, I can come up, no, I can't come up top of my head right now. I can look back.
But it's not going to be $14,500.
No, right now, I base it as a high-risk audit.
So it's more than likely at least
25.
the 25,000 rough number that we're
I would start at 25 if protocols have been put in place to start making sure that the books are, at the accrual with the payables and receivables. I feel more comfortable with 25. If nothing's been put in place and, that goal's not been implemented, be done for the trial balance for June 30th, 2019, probably be much higher than that. But, this process is starting in place and the town feels like it'll have a trial balance ready and minor tweaks by us and nothing major. 25 would probably be the price I'd go with.
So today's July 16th. Are we already behind the 8 ball with regards to our goal to get the deadline to get off the list, or are we okay?
As from the audit perspective, we wouldn't, the only thing we would have done right now is get the audit contract into the LGC for approval, which, once that's signed,
Okay. So the ball's really in the town's court to get the trial balance out of this point.
I would say about the first weeks of mid-August, if there's not a good trial balance in place, then you're behind the ball.
Okay.
Okay,
I'm good.
thank you. Thank you very much.
That was 4,
So,
right?
yeah, that's number four.
And
4,
5,
4,
yeah.
5. So number 6, discussion of possible action on recommendation before the commissioners regarding approval of the 2018 audit. Do I have a motion to approve the audit?
Go ahead, Tom.
You good? Go, you.
I'll make a motion to approve the audit.
I'll second.
Any discussion additional before we decide on that? Okay, those in favor?
Aye.
Against? So it's 4-0 to approve to recommend approval to the board. Number 8, discussion of possible action on recommendations regarding the retention of readers.
On 7.
Or 7. Oh, I circled it,
Approval
sorry,
of the revised
sorry.
contract.
Research. Discussion of possible action on recommendation to the Board of Commissioners regarding approval of the revised 2018 audit contract, which is a $25,000, a $10,000 increase in cost over the original. Do I have a motion to approve that?
I'll move that we approve, we recommend approval.
I think
Second?
we need a little bit.
Move it. If someone wants second for discussion, we can discuss.
Second? I second it?
Okay.
Okay.
Discussion. I'll be honest with you. I mean, we're kind of stuck, between a rock and a hard place here. I really don't want to go for a new firm. I think we need to have 2 years with the same firm to get the benefit of what we've already invested in. But at the same time, the gentleman was very optimistic, early or late in the year, early in this year, saying he's going to be finished. And then didn't come back and I guess maybe he talked to you. I don't think the rest of us knew that it was going to cost him more money. I think from a vendor standpoint, he should have handled it better. I would want a really good understanding with him next year that if there's going to be more cost than he's expecting, within maybe 10%, then he needs to come back and have a formal stop, and we all agree before we move forward.
No doubt about that.
I mean, I agree. I feel like we've been in the dark. I mean,
Yeah.
this is the first of anything. First, we've talked to Jay.
Yeah, well, I think the real awkward thing to me is when we're voting to approve, I mean, we're sort of stuck because I don't know that we at this stage, I mean, the process to go out and solicit new quotes, I mean, there's no way we make the October 31st deadline work, just because that process takes, best case, a month, but realistically even longer, and then go through the contract process and the like. So yeah, to me, we almost have to address that question first, whether we want to continue to retain this firm, and then we can negotiate. Then it becomes a different kind of a negotiation
Well,
process.
yeah, I mean, my understanding that the motion was to retain them, and I absolutely, part of it is if we don't, I think we're on the list for another year. There's nothing we can do about it. And then we're going to face the startup issues with another company coming in, because they all got the same startup.
Well, let's vote on number 7, which is to approve the audit
The
contract.
contract with the.
Oh, we haven't voted on that?
And-
Oh, okay.
And then we'll go to number 8.
Okay, sorry, I got it.
Well, that's what I thought your motion was.
Yeah, maybe I made it wrong. You want to reread it? I made it wrong.
Motion-
What was the motion?
It was
Discussion
to
of possible action. Oh,
No, you go ahead.
clerk,
You got the official one.
I just had to recommend approval, and it was the $10,000 increase.
Okay,
So
okay,
it's
all right.
approved with a revised.
That's
Okay.
what he meant. That's what he
I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. Okay.
All right, so you got a motion and a second.
To
Yeah.
approve the
yeah, and
$10,000.
the discussion was, my feeling is we probably are not legally obligated to do it if we weren't told early enough and in detail and the town approved. But my feeling is they couldn't have expected the books to be in the condition they were in. We got $2 million of adjustments plus $20 million from the previous year. They spent $44,000, to me, it's the right thing
Well,
to do. And
I did
also,
think-
I want
next
to
year-
add something here that's not been said,
Yep.
but it's been deeply implied, is that we haven't been getting, our auditors our prior auditors were avoiding issuing this material control weakness statement, and that these things just didn't crop up in this past calendar year. This hasn't been
The
going
fact
on
is,
before.
last year's didn't issue material weakness, and we had $21 million of adjustment, including some from previous years that they hadn't followed up on. So, to me, I don't know how you can claim to be a CPA and not.
I would still, as an audit committee, I'd like to understand more about what these entries are and adjustments.
I'm sure we can get
We
copies.
can get that.
Yeah, just, I mean, because like I said, you say 21 million, like I said, it's debits and credits, so I mean, I won't even, 21 million so big, I get you.
Yeah, but to me, that would have been a material weakness. if
Well,
we
it's
had to do that.
material, I don't argue that. I
It's
just-
only 11, it's only half our annual budget, not our entire
I
annual
feel
budget.
better.
And they had to go back and audit those.
Yeah, but I would like to understand from the audit committee, I think we need to understand.
I absolutely agree.
Well,
We
Absolutely.
get that.
Yeah.
But we, for some reason, we now crept up in a higher price tier of audit. I don't know if
Well, I
it's,
think that will drop once we hire we've got an outsider hired to help the town get the books in, and they get up to skill.
that's an additional cost.
Then the audit will be
that-
back.
that-
Well,
that-
that is what it
Should have
is.
helped out the prior auditors as well, too, so.
It is what it is. We just hired somebody.
We heard here, and we heard the same thing from RSM, it's getting tougher going forward. The
Yeah.
yellow book is getting tougher, it's the way it's gonna be. And I think it's good for us. I mean, I'm all for more financial rigor, better financial reporting, it's right. So that's the future. We're not gonna get the audits we've had in the past. The LGC isn't gonna accept the kind of audits we had in the past.
Well, I mean, as a taxpayer, you want to know your money's.
We got a lot of
being
bigger
handled correctly.
budgets, yeah, we're a big town now.
I think the quicker we get to the point of having staff better trained and an outsider available to the town to help the staff do that, the better off we are. The more likely we are to get rid of this concern annually. And it's
Yeah.
especially
I guess-
timely.
I guess so the other difference is, I think, that the prior firms were a little more local.
They're smaller.
Yeah, smaller, but then also they have the advantage of easier access to the staff and the like, and that's something that, as long as we realize there might be a premium associated with going to a larger firm, although it would have been nice to maybe have seen that earlier on when we're looking at the quotes and know what we were paying for.
So are we ready for a vote on approving the contract?
Yes, I'll call the question.
All in favor?
Aye.
Against?
Me.
3-1. Number 8, discussion and possible action on recommendation to the Board of Commissioners regarding retention of Reeves as the 2019 audit firm. Motion, sir?
Well, I'll make the motion because I think I tried to make it before. I moved that let me get it right this time. We recommend retaining Rives as the 2019 audit firm.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Discussion necessary?
We kind of had
Is
that.
is it inappropriate to ask the town staff how they dealt with Rives and what their?
It is now.
It is,
We're
okay,
not talking.
that's fine.
I mean, my thought on this is, you know, we've kind of set the bar for this year. Everybody knows what we're trying to do. If it doesn't work out this year, then we got a serious discussion next year. But
Yeah, if he comes back on December, if we're still talking about this in January
if
next
we get off the
year,
list, I'm happy.
Yeah.
Early on, be looking at another ours.
Call the
Okay.
question.
Those in favor?
Aye.
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 Against? 4-0, Madam Clerk. Okay, number 9, discussion recommendation to the Board of Commissioners regarding the process for audit committee's involvement overseeing the annual audit and evaluating the external auditor.
I got some statement comments on that. I mean, you know, we were just given kind of the milestones, you know, mid-August trial balance, field work by September, draft by, you know, October 31st at the latest. I would like this group to be very engaged, involved in helping make sure these milestones get met versus us meeting in January or February like we are now discussing the situation we're in. To me, to be effective is, these are the milestones, we ought to have a role in helping meet them. Not sure what the role is, but,
Yeah.
otherwise we come in after the fact like this and it's all
But
over.
that's just isn't that just a
Check.
check the box kind of
Some-
report?
Well, I didn't know how late we were running on this audit, and I didn't know
No,
why.
but who does that communication come from?
It should come from the finance director.
Well,
It would have to come to the audit committee. That's the question.
I'll whip out our good old ordinance again. Number 11, provide an avenue of communication among the Board of Commissioners, town management, and the external independent auditor. So I interpret that as we're the avenue of communication between those three, and we can report to the board, we're on track, we're not on track, here's why.
So what we're looking for is probably a process to offer to the board as to how we might see it working best. And we've got some that didn't happen this year. We didn't have an end of audit meeting.
We didn't have a kickoff meeting, this is the first meeting we've had regarding this audit, unless I'm missing something, this is it, and we're so late, it's all over.
Without the first meeting between the audit chair, and we agreed in the previous group to have the audit chair and one member of the board, of the committee, sit down with the auditor and the town manager when that draft came in, to understand what the draft was and to get a view on it, so we could judge whether or not the auditor had done a good job. The other would be that the auditor would come and talk to the audit committee after the town had agreed the audit was okay, and they could sign off on it. He would meet with us, and we would then make a recommendation to the board, whom the auditor would come and talk with. Yeah, but we would have made a recommendation based on having a meeting. That's at least the minimum 3, and I like the idea of the auditor telling us, the committee periodically, or the finance director periodically, how are we doing? Are we on track? Are we late, gonna be late? Are we overrunning?
But the thing is, we're looking for a more expeditious process, and knowing how committees and the scheduling of committee meetings and the timing of those meetings, we can't become a burden. I mean, we can't become a burden to the process. I mean,
But to your point, I mean, it ought to be a timeline checklist that says, or a project plan, if you want to do that, I think.
yeah, I mean,
Mr. Myers,
we define a list of
Key milestones.
key milestones, and if they're delayed by more than X days or whatever, then they're responsible for.
Notifying John.
I think the situation we're in is either gonna have a meeting with John and one of us,
Yeah.
or we're gonna have a public meeting like this. But those are the only options. And, I'm just throwing it out as an option, is have a public meeting mid to late August saying, okay, trial balance, is it done? Have another public meeting end of September, okay, is the field work done? Having a final one in October, is the draft out? And those would be 3 meetings, put them on the calendar.
Yeah, but
They
are you
know
gonna
that-
have the auditor come down and?
Wouldn't need to be here for the trial balance, because that's not his. Should be here for the field work, because that is his, and then probably the draft, in theory, would be the final at that point.
Well, why does it have to be I'm not trying to hide.
Well, then we have a-
Well, why does it have to be a public meeting? Why can't it be a checklist that says, if you're not done by X time, give or take 4 or 5 days, then the audit chairman calls us meeting.
It seems like this year we were trying to have individual meetings between audit committee members, and it appears that did not go well. Didn't happen. So,
I'm not sure.
did we have any meetings? Did you have any meetings?
No.
This year?
Yeah.
No, with the auditor.
Yeah, we were
No,
gonna
no.
have a kickoff meeting, we're gonna have a midpoint meeting, we had all these, did we? I
Yeah,
never,
kickoff.
when was the kickoff meeting?
Mid-August, the 15th of August. The auditor came in, David and I sat down.
You and David said no.
Right, sat
Okay.
down.
I wasn't aware of that. Okay,
That's just to start the audit, get to know who the auditor is and that sort of thing. Subsequent to that, we didn't have any meetings.
I mean, I think we need to have a more formal structure. I think having a public meeting to say, hey, we got the trial balance done. That's a little overkill to me. I mean, if you need to set a date with the town and audit committee, it says you're gonna have it done by a certain date, and if it's not done by a certain date, we pull a meeting together.
But we could have,
I'm good with that. You
two,
know,
two of the audit committee, get the information, because that's not a public meeting, didn't require a special call to meeting. Just two, the chair and one member, either talk with the finance director or to get updates on it, and that, the chair is gonna be a commissioner, let that chair then advise the board in the next meeting, subsequently, that everything's on track. That's a possibility, not to have to call extra meetings.
how much interaction have we had with regards to where are we, how are we, you know, we look at this year, I just don't want to repeat this year.
No.
You know, I want to hit the deadline.
That's why.
And somebody's going to have to say, has the trial balance been submitted? Is it acceptable? Are there issues with it? And if the answer is no, we're in trouble, then yeah, I think we should have a meeting and run up the flag.
And on that top checklist, you can require Jay to say, give us an update every 45 days, pick a number, 30 days or something that says, we want a formal update of what's going on. It doesn't have to be
Absolutely agree.
it could be a letter,
I agree.
something.
Just needs to happen.
And that could go to the finance director, who could then send it to members of the audit committee.
The key thing is just the commitment that he sees, the firm sees no reason that the final report's gonna be delayed. That's the key thing, irrespective of these milestones, once we get, if you're looking for just interim commitments to that effect.
So how are we going
So
to
should-
approach that? Are we going to make a motion that Tom Myers puts on the checklist and gets back to us?
I'll tell you my opinion is the board's going to decide what they want to do, but I'm fine with offering up a suggestion on behalf of this board to the committee. I mean, we can say what we think,
I'll be
but
glad to help you.
make a motion on, you know,
I make a, go ahead, I'm
No,
sorry.
no.
go for it.
What's your
Would
motion?
you like to help?
By the way, is anything we do now going to get presented at tonight's CP's meeting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we make a recommendation now, it'll get presented to the board, and then I don't know if they'll decide tonight, but
And they'll understand it because they're here.
I hope so.
All right, I'm gonna make a recommendation that at a minimum, Tom and I will work with the finance director and the town staff to come up with a timeline, checklist, project plan, whatever you wanna call it, and we'll bring that back 45 days.
Well, I don't want to modify your motion, but we'll monitor and report.
45 days is after, by the way, the first item on his checklist.
Yeah. To me, we just monitor and report whether we're making these milestones.
Okay. Do you wanna formalize those milestones, or?
Well, yeah, the trial balance by mid-August, the field work done by the end of September, a draft of the report October 31st at the latest. That's too late because it's got to be December 1st filing, so I would say October 15th. Mid-August, end of September, and October.
What's the December?
That's the file with the LGC to get off the
The
list.
latest.
So that's everything, management, discussion and analysis, representational, and a whole package. Got to be submitted.
So, just to clarify.
Okay, yeah, why don't you restate the
Heather's
motion?
down there going, what are y'all doing?
Yeah. I mean,
Restate the motion.
Hang on there. So, of course, I think you modified
What?
the motion a little bit.
Okay,
So basically what we're saying is, you and I are gonna sit down with the finance director, come up with a checklist, or we're just gonna meet with him every couple of weeks to make sure, what was your modification?
we were gonna monitor progress against these milestones
Okay.
and report.
Okay. I'm all right with that. You got that, Heather?
If I'm combining the two of yours together, I would go with that Tom and Woody are going to sit down with the finance director and monitor the milestones and report back to the committee.
The only thing is, I think we need to meet with the auditor too, because the field work and those are on his plate, not the town's plate. So we need to meet with the town
He
and,
can meet by telephone.
yeah, I mean, it could be a virtual meeting, it doesn't have
But
to be in
what
person.
we're asking for is a process now, not that you would be the ones that would in the future
No, this-
do the monitoring.
we're trying to fulfill our responsibility to, what exactly is it here? You know, oversee the external audit process. That's what the ordinance says.
So the
And
motion
if
would be.
Woody made it, I'll second it.
I honestly, I'm not gonna,
Okay.
I need a
Well,
motion
we need-
from one of you instead of you guys going in on each
Okay,
other,
well,
if I could get
well,
one motion.
Well, let's just back up a second. I made a motion. If you want to modify my motion, and I'll go back and repeat my motion, and then you can suggest a modification. Let's do this the right way.
Okay, so where are we starting
Okay,
from?
my motion was to create a process, a checklist, project plan that the town would be monitored against for making sure the audit was completed on time.
And my modification is the town and the auditor. To make sure they're both making progress.
Okay, just to make clear, I said, let's come up with a process. I didn't say anything about monitoring, so.
Okay,
So do you want to modify, ask him to approve modifying it?
would you approve modifying it to, we would include the auditor and we would include monitoring?
I'll agree with that.
So
Okay.
restate it to the clerk, what your motion is then.
All right, you ready, Heather?
Yes. Yes.
I know I'm gonna owe you for this one, I'm sorry. All right, so the motion is that Tom and I will create a checklist or milestone list of activities that have to be completed and their timeline, so to make sure the audit is completed by October 31st. Which will include us monitoring those activities and reporting back to the audit committee. That sound right?
Okay.
I'll second that.
Any other discussion? Mark, anything? Ready to vote? Those in favor?
Aye.
Against? 4 against. 4? So 4-0, Madam Clerk.
Okay.
Number 10.
Mr. Schiavone had submitted something.
I think something's already been submitted to the board for tonight.
Well, when he sent it out, if you'll remember at our last meeting, I suggested maybe we do revenues and expenses and
Right.
debt.
Right,
Well, what he sent out was not that.
right.
And so I submitted back to him an example of what I was talking about. And I don't know if that's the final, I had requested at the last meeting that it be
Should we
revenues.
remove it?
I think we should defer action on this until he can be here and we can talk
Okay,
about
we'll
it.
defer action on number 10. Number 11.
Well, that was mine, and I think because I keep reading the ordinance and all the things we're supposed to be doing, and I keep getting frustrated that we're not doing it or able to do it. There's 12 things on here that are audit responsibilities of the audit committee.
Was there any particular one that you feel like we're not doing?
Well, serve as advisor to the board, I think we're doing that. Assistant advise the board of commissioners and oversight responsibilities for financial reporting process, I'm not sure we're doing that. Systems of internal financial controls, I'm not sure we're doing that. External audit process, we're doing that now. Recommend the selection of independent auditor, I think we're doing that. Evaluate the performance of the external audit firm, I think we're doing that. Review, advise, and make recommendations to the Board of Commissioners with respect to the town's treasury management function and its risk management policies and procedures, including, without limitation, the town's insurance and self-insurance policies. We're definitely not doing any of that. Confirm the town's internal control systems are in place and implemented, including information technology, security, and control. We're not doing any of that. Confirm the town management implements the audit report recommendations. I don't feel we're doing that.
Okay, back a second, number 6.
Yep.
Isn't RSM, are they looking at an internal control system? Or is that just
Well,
finance
RSM made
policy?
recommendations. I interpret this as to confirm that those systems are in place and implemented.
Yep, okay.
Confirm the town management implements the audit report recommendations. Not sure, continually evaluate the independence of the external auditors, the audit findings, and forward findings to the Board of Commissioners. I feel we're doing that through the discussions we had about the ability of the audit firm to also create financial reports. Review the town's consolidated annual financial report, management letter, and management response. I think we just got that, so we can do that. Review and assess the adequacy of this charter at least every 2 years with any revisions submitted to the Board of Commissioners. We can do that, I don't think we're 2 years. Provide an avenue of communication among the Board of Commissioners, town management, external independent auditors. That's the one we were discussing. I interpret that as we communicate between all three. Perform other functions from time to time as shall be delegated and assigned to it by the Board of Commissioners. I think we will do that if we get assigned anything. So those are the, I don't think we're hitting on all of these. And I don't know if we're okay with that.
I mean, do you see a challenge to doing that?
Well, I see a challenge. This is an ordinance.
Well, I mean, the point is, I know some of these we just ain't gotten around to. But, I mean, are you saying there's some impediment to us doing these, or is it a matter of we got to take a little bit of bite of the whale every month?
The reason I think I got this on here and got me a little riled up was I do think at the last meeting, when there was discussion about John contacting the auditors, it was like it was a huge sin. And it's not how I interpret number 11.
It is. Sure.
It's a sin?
Can't talk this. Sorry.
My point's been made. So maybe we're misinterpreting the provision of the ordinance.
Remind me if I'm wrong. I think you said a while ago, the last audit
Committee meeting.
the last audit committee, last year's, I guess.
No, the one July 5th.
No.
Oh, okay,
Hang on.
okay.
Wasn't there some agreement that any communication with the auditors would include 2 members of the audit committee?
No, it would be members with the finance director and the auditor.
Okay.
My only point is, we need to agree how we fulfill this clause. Provide an avenue of communication among the Board of Commissioners, town management, and the external independent auditors. Provide an avenue of communication between those 3 parties. So that's how it reads.
I agree. And I think it's the audit committee, right? So I think it needs to be, if there's communication between the finance director and the outside auditor and the audit committee, it needs to be in a formal setting.
Yep.
So that everybody's hearing the same things and getting things at the same time.
Okay?
So we need to come up with if it's during the audit, we have the auditor checking in with us every 30 days, going back to the checklist thing we're talking about. Maybe part of it is we have an update from the auditor by conference call every 30 days or whatever. We need to do something, but I think it needs to include the whole audit committee if we're having formal communications.
Perfectly fine.
Well, if you have the whole committee of a public meeting,
Yeah, it's fine.
and the public meeting is even with a telephone call, you can't do that without
Whatever this public meeting about. I mean, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, there's an introductory meeting with the auditor, right? Is that a public meeting?
Well, all of them.
2 of us.
Just 2.
If 2 of us are there, then it's not. But if you have more than 2, then it's going to be a public meeting. And a lot of times, my own experience with audit committees is there are things that get discussed that the public would probably misunderstand very often. And you have discussions about things with the finance director, with the auditor. 2 of us, and the recommendation was 2, so there wasn't a word of mouth. The one person said yes, one said no. And that person, if it was the chair, whoever is the chair here, and one of the audit committee members, they can take that back to the board at the next board meeting. But they could have that thing without having a public meeting.
Yeah.
And I think it's necessary periodically to have that meeting with the finance director and with the auditor, at least 2 or 3 times during an audit. How else do we evaluate how they're doing?
Yeah, I think it needs to always be 2 people.
Yeah, I agree.
Always 2
Yeah,
people.
the board, you agree that
Yep,
before?
that looks great. I guess the question is, we can meet with the auditor as a committee, 2 people?
Right. And the chair and one, and we can do that, that's not a problem.
Okay.
I think the other issue you have, and I think Woody touched on it, is if the audit committee doesn't step up and decide, we're gonna look at internal control
Mm-hmm.
to see what it is it okay, is it being implemented properly? We have to actively do that.
Yep.
If we just sit here, nobody's gonna do it for us. So this committee has to say, we're gonna be active in that once a quarter, we're gonna look at some part, either payables or receivables or something. And now that we're going through the process of going to the accrual basis, we're gonna periodically check it and see how it's going. That's all. Sit with the finance director, whatever, and go through the process. How's it working? If not, then we're just looking at financials once a quarter, and those financials aren't accrual financials, they're cash-based, so you don't,
Yeah.
we're not really as effective as we could
No, I
be.
mean, the point I was trying to make was, I mean, there's 12 things on here, at least
Could be far more effective.
10 of them could be, is requiring some action.
But we
on
have
our
to
part.
activate it.
We have to do so.
activate it. As a group. I think
Yes,
going
yes,
forward, that's what we
yes.
need to do.
So I think when we have our quarterly meetings, we need to have one or two of these items on here for us to be having
And maybe
discussion.
one or two of the committee will sit with the finance director and work on an issue, and then come back to the committee at the next meeting, say, we worked this out, it's fine. We tell the board, we looked at this control, it looks fine to us, and you just constantly monitor. I think
The
that would make.
only request I make was it's not always the same
No,
chairman and.
No, it'll be the
same
chairman,
person.
but
I think
it probably
they-
won't always be the same chairman.
Well, no, I'm not talking about, if
Especially
you
if
take,
you get reelected.
if it's the chairman and one other person, it's not
Right.
always the same.
No,
person.
be very, give everybody experience to do that.
Yeah. I think we tried, it's 6 months from now, we come back here whenever and see how it's working.
Okay. So we agree with that?
I'm good.
Okay. Number 12,
I just only want to add that I think we got to be careful that we don't, make sure that we don't create an extra burden, undue burden to the process. That we try to be as
no.
as expeditious and not because
No, I agree.
we could bog this thing down, particularly.
Well,
Say, don't do this until you hear from us kind of thing. We've got to be
No, I,
an outside.
It says
it
an
wouldn't be unless it
avenue.
was needed. I mean, you know, you're not communicating to communicate.
It says an
You gotta-
avenue of communication, it doesn't say become another bureaucracy.
You know, the issue was, I thought we really needed to hear from the auditor, and we needed to hear from the auditor. And now we have, but at the time, I felt like we couldn't, well, yeah, we just didn't have that avenue to call the auditor.
Okay, go to number 12. Discussion and possible action on recommendation to the Board of Commissioners regarding the oversight of the recommendations detailing the RSM report for correction of existing internal control weaknesses. We had at the last meeting, we were ready to get a periodic update, and the finance director advised us that it wasn't appropriate for us to be involved, that needed to be taken to the Board of Commissioners in total. And if that's the case, then
It's in conflict with the
it's
ordinance.
in conflict with the ordinance, because the ordinance says we are responsible for doing that. So I think we would recommend, or maybe decide to recommend to the board, that in fact we are authorized by the board to get those reports periodically to see which ones of those have been corrected, how it's been corrected.
If you don't want us to do it, then change the ordinance. But we got conflict, because the ordinance says we're supposed to do
I
it.
think it's our responsibility, I mean, that was an audit, that's not a formal audit. Well, it was an audit of the financial process,
Yeah.
I don't want to confuse that with the audit that we
No,
just
internal
talked about.
control.
But it's our responsibility, okay, if the concerns have been identified, we at least need to know that they're being
What the
taken
plan is
care
to
of.
approve them and how they're being approved.
If David just comes to us and says, hey, here's 13 and I fixed all these,
Yeah, that's a start, but we haven't even gotten that far.
that's what I'm saying, but we need to, I mean,
Yeah,
Well,
no, we need,
so we'll take that to the board tonight, that the board clarifies what the role is. And the same with 13. If the audit committee needs to look at something, it'll ask for information from the finance director, and it needs to be able to get that without having to wait for the next board meeting to get permission to ask for something about an internal control process or application of controls or something like that. So,
I mean,
you can't monitor internal controls
I
without,
understand, but is the audit committee going to ask for that information, or is it going to be the chairman just asking for it, or an
I
audit
think
committee?
the committee would decide it.
This will come out of the regular
Quarterly
quarterly.
meetings,
meetings.
okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
And he may then decide, the committee may decide, I would like two of you,
Yes.
you two, to sit with the finance director and get permission to sit with the clerk
I'm good.
and see how the clerk's doing it and agree, yeah, it's
Yeah, I
okay, you
just
fixed
don't-
it.
Don't want a situation where all 5 of us, counting Tony,
No,
are making.
no, I think that would be overwhelming.
Yes.
And that's why you need to go through the finance director anytime to talk to anybody on staff, or the town manager rather, to go to anybody on staff. But when they have time, and those two people can organize it, you would sit down and, so one of the things you were trying to do was fix the internal control over disbursements.
Yep.
How's that working? Is it going okay? Are you done? You need help? We give you any ideas, or, need any help? And when they're done, then you can report back to the board.
It's done.
We looked at it and it's done. We agreed that that was an acceptable approach. Okay? Okay, that wraps up our agenda. Anything else? Well, we can't have any other section, no new business. So, have a motion to adjourn?
I move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you.